our minds around. And there is a federal response to continue to talk about. And we're lucky now to be joined by a congressman representing the 32nd Congressional District, Brad Sherman. And Representative Sherman, I just want to thank you again for being part of our coverage and continue this conversation with us. And again, our heart goes out to you and all your constituents there.
Good to be with you, and thanks for your tremendous coverage. I represent, among other areas, the Palisades, Malibu, Brentwood, and so many of my constituents are watching Spectrum.
Well, yeah, we appreciate that. We appreciate their trust and your trust, and you continue to have these conversations with us. I mean, you've represented that area for over 25 years, and so many of the stories of the people, the relationships that you have, just give us a sense of what you are hearing now and what's on their minds, because it's devastation, it's destruction, in some cases the inability to go back and see what's left, and there's also all the trauma around what's past and what might be to come.
I've only represented the West LA area that got hit for a couple of years. I've been in Congress for a long time, but I'm known as Brad Sherman from Sherman Oaks. The one thing I'm hearing about is this letter. If you go to the FEMA website and you apply for aid and you indicate that you have any kind of fire insurance at all, you get something that looks like you're being rejected immediately. And people have to understand this just means they need more information about what kind of insurance you have, because they're not going to give you money if you already have enough insurance. So what looks like a rejection letter is really just a request for more information. The amount of benefit that FEMA provides is significant because people want real money that they can keep, and FEMA does that to the tune of about $97,000 if you qualify for all the aid. And so people think this aid is important, and when they get rejected, or they think they've been rejected, it's a huge problem for them.
Yeah, it's helpful to have those kinds of printouts because I think people are seeing dollar amounts and they're getting confused. I mean, we just had President Biden talking about the $770 that can come immediately. Thank you again for holding it up. And there's also a lot.
If I can go through it, it's
no,
$770 in immediate money, $43,000 to deal with housing issues, chiefly rebuilding. $10,000, if you get this $43,000, the state throws in $10,000, and then $43,000 to deal with everything other than real estate, particularly your car. So that's the maximum grant you could get. And people shouldn't be put off by a website that seems to give them an immediate rejection because they have insurance. Now, this is only money that you get if if you don't have adequate insurance. You're not going to make a profit on this disaster. Nobody should. But if you're underinsured or uninsured, this is the amount of grant money that can come in. And then in addition, you've got the SBA loan programs, both for businesses and individuals. And for individuals, you're talking about a $500,000 4% home loan and up to $100,000 to cover everything else. And the good thing, couple of good things about this loan, it's 4%, and they'll subordinate it to everything else. So you may have a first, you may need to get a second on your home, and at the same time you can get an SBA loan. But none of this is going to be enough for a lot of people who have lost everything, particularly in the Palisades.
Well, I think it's important that you mentioned that some people are having a difficult time with that website, disasterassistance.gov. And in part, it's people have been confused. It's an important message. If you have insurance, that's where you go first. If you're underinsured or uninsured, this is where we can go with FEMA and disasterassistance.gov. That's one reason people are getting kicked out. Another is because I believe people are having confusion about head of household versus others, how many people from a household can apply. Clarify that for people, too, because that has been one of the hiccups in the system.
I haven't heard that as a program, as a problem. I believe you register on behalf of your whole family. For those who are undocumented immigrants, it gets a little tricky. You can apply on behalf of the one person, perhaps one person in your family that is a U.S. citizen, even if the others are undocumented.
Right. That's helpful. And FEMA Administrator Bob Fenton, Regional Administrator Bob Fenton, was on talking a little bit about the head of household situation. But to your point, of course, for those undocumented and those other situations, also important. Now, all of this are the kinds of federal funds that are coming. I want to mention
we're covering this in our telephone town hall on Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. Anybody can dial in at this number, and we'll have Bob Fenton on. So if you enjoyed watching Bob Fenton here on Spectrum and you want to ask him a question, you dial this number at 7 o'clock on Wednesday.
I got to say, Bob Fenton and so many of those folks that have been working for FEMA and with FEMA have such compassionate ways about them, and it's understandable. They see so much of the suffering, and they're there just working with the folks to help bring them a little bit of relief. So that's helpful, and I think people did. I've actually received a lot of notes about Bob Fenton and the interview that we had about mental health and beyond, which, as he said, was a big deal. But we also talked with Bob Fenton and FEMA, and we've had these conversations about President Biden declaring this major disaster declaration, which has freed up a lot of FEMA's capacity to surge certain funds through and for fire management grants and these personal grants. And then the conversation becomes what happens when there's a new administration. And you certainly heard one of your colleagues, Speaker Mike Johnson in the House, talking today in a quick walk through the halls of power that he believes that the continual federal funds, especially in this new administration, this new session of Congress, to California, should be predicated upon some conditions, making it conditional. This sort of harkens back to what we heard with President-elect Trump talking about some ultimatums around disaster relief funds if Governor Newsom complies on water policy. What do you make of everything that you heard from Speaker Johnson?
Well, I think it's outrageous to have unrelated things attached to this. We already have under state law a requirement that those who rebuild, for example, in the Palisades, are going to have to rebuild according to, I think it's called Chapter 7A of the code. And that is a much more fire resistance code than any of the buildings that were in the Palisades that were built before 2008. So, seeing this from the standpoint of others from other parts of the country, they can say, look, if we're going to provide funds, we want to make sure that the new structures are much more fire resistant than the old structures. And I think that there's a lot that we need to do to deal with to make ourselves more resilient. On the other hand, if they say to members from California, we're going to stiff your state unless you vote to abolish the constitutional amendment that limits Trump to 2 terms, no, we passed that constitutional amendment because we don't want an imperial presidency.
Well, there is certainly a lot of negotiating and compromise that happens there in D.C. and in Congress. So I think you're sketching out some of the parameters, the guideposts for what may be eligible and what might not be for the conversation about funds and policy moving forward. And that brings up, our final point here that I'd like to speak with you about, this idea about insurance. On a state level, we have an insurance program, and we have insurers that are often leaving. We have this Insurer of Last Resort, the FAIR plan, that is essentially funded from premiums that come from folks who are insured, but really it's insurers that kick into this fund that is grossly undercapitalized for the kinds of claims that we're going to see to the tunes of billions here. And VP Kamala Harris, when speaking at that press briefing with President Biden, said, as a Californian, we should have a conversation about insurance. And she was kind of alluding to it being on a federal level. What do you make of what you see of the state level conversation on insurance here in California, and what could be done federally to sort of round this out, to supplement and to move it forward?
We all want insurance. We want it to be reasonably priced. We can't just magically create solvent insurance companies and say charge a little and pay a lot. What we need to do first and foremost is reduce the risk. And then we may need a federal backstop on fire insurance that is similar to what we already have on flood insurance. And there is a system at the federal level to provide flood insurance that otherwise the private sector wouldn't be able to provide. So I look forward to working with Adam Schiff and others on that proposal. And then we do have to look to see whether the margins that these insurance companies have seem too high. But frankly, I think insurance companies are not going to have any profit this year. And the insurance companies, as I understand it, will have to kick in some of their money to this fair share plan, because the fair plan probably doesn't have the reserves to deal with all of the claims.
No, it certainly doesn't. At last check, San Francisco Chronicle has checked, there was something like $385 million cash on hand as of May or March of last year. Certainly hasn't much more.
The number one asset of that plan is not its cash, although $300 million is a nice asset. It's their reinsurance contracts. Mm-hmm. And so the reinsurance companies from around the world are going to be kicking in billions of dollars as well. And we pay for them.
Well, that would be helpful. I spoke with your colleague, Representative Judy Chu, and she said what she was hearing was that they were going to make people whole based on their claims for the fair plan. She didn't exactly have the specifics as to how, but that's what she was hearing. This is an evolving conversation, and I appreciate you opening up and continuing to have it with us, Representative Sherman. And really, thank you again for all your time, and thanks for the props too. That's good. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's what, hold it up.
You'll only be away from Spectrum for 1 hour if you join my town hall on Wednesday evening. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Well, they can't read your lips because you had the prop up. So I know you're not saying no new taxes. You're saying the town hall, and that's important.
I'm saying come to my town hall. That's what I'm saying, even though you can't see my lips.
You can't read his lips.
Telephone down hall. You don't have to drive. Yes.
Representative Sherman, thank you so much for taking some time. We really appreciate your spirit as we continue to recover together at this.
Look forward to joining you again. Thanks, bye.
Okay, thank you again. This is Representative Brad Sherman. They were 32nd Congressional District, hard hit by the Palisades Fire, offering lots of supports and some props, holding it up. You heard him right there. You didn't need to read those lips. We could talk a little bit more about what's happening with these winds tonight. It's the PDS, the particularly dangerous situation.